In another impressive move by investors, a consortium of investors from South Korea has concluded plans to build 100,000 barrel capacity refineries in various parts of Nigeria. The federal government actually announced these plans recently. The current Minister of State for Petroleum Resources stated this at the maiden edition of a summit organized by the Crude Oil Refineries Owners Association of Nigeria in Lagos. According to the government, it is encouraging investors to build refineries by providing an open environment for all. The government noted that approval was recently granted to invite the consortium to make the project a reality. Nigeria currently encourages investors to build limited refineries by providing an open environment. A recent approval, as earlier stated, was granted to invite to Nigeria a consortium of investors from South Korea, which intends to build 100,000 barrels model refineries in 4 different locations in the country. The government has also adopted the public-private partnership model to unlock investments in the midstream and downstream segments of the oil and gas sector, which will lead to the establishment of more modular and mega refineries across the country. The oil minister also noted that it will yield results because the federal government is open to equity investments in modular refineries and other upcoming refineries as a step to ensure energy security. The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission has also developed and published the Domestic Crude Supply Obligation Guidelines to ensure transparency in the oil industry and ensure access to feedstock by our local refineries. Over the years, the Nigerian government has prioritized and worked with stakeholders to ensure effective implementation of the recommendations of the Modular Refineries Committee to give special concessions to local refinery owners, thereby guaranteeing feedstock to their refineries. The government of Nigeria has also noted that it will ensure that the downstream sector is deregulated by 100% and put in place a necessary framework that will ease the impact on the poor masses. Currently, the ministry has facilitated easier access to existing tax and other exemptions on refinery equipment importation, which is part of the government's plan to make Nigeria self-sufficient for petroleum producers and become Africa's petroleum refining hub. The government has also noted that though the PIA created the Petroleum Ministry and National Gas Infrastructure Fund, which sources its funds from the sales of petroleum products in the country, the thought of the ministry was that a portion of the fund is used to support infrastructural development for refineries like in the gas value chain. In effect, the government also said that it will initiate the review of the PIA to enable this. Meanwhile, Koran as a body will take up the campaign through the Petroleum Technology Development Fund and the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. The government will also prioritize partnerships with international institutions in the knowledge transfer for manpower in refinery operations and investment in research and development to support technological advancement and innovations in the refining sector. In no distant time, the Nigerian government hopes to create the partnership programs in collaboration with existing refineries to develop expertise in 8 refinery operations. In a relative development, the government actually noted that it is confident that Nigeria's oil and gas industry will attract up to $50 billion worth of investment by the end of 2025. The government is also working hard to open up many wells across the country that were initially drilled and locked. The ongoing reform in the oil and gas sector is attracting investors. Currently, there are so many oil wells that were drilled and locked up, and part of the current government mandate is to open up those wells to boost Nigeria's oil production. This development comes after the Dangote refinery began the distribution of fuel on September 15, 2024 with the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited as the sole off-taker. The Nigerian oil and gas industry has witnessed a significant surge in investment in recent years, particularly in the refining sector. Investors from around the world are trooping into Nigeria to build refineries driven by the country's vast oil reserves, growing demand for petroleum products, and favorable business environment. One of the key factors attracting investors to Nigeria's refining sector is the country's vast oil reserves. Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer with proven oil reserves of over 37 billion barrels. The country's oil reserves are primarily located in the Niger Delta region, which provides a strategic location for refining operations. With a population of over 200 million people, the growing demand for petroleum products rises, and with a growing middle class and increasing demand for energy, the country's current refining capacity is unable to meet domestic demand, resulting in a reliance on imported petroleum products. Investors are also taking advantage of this opportunity to build new refineries that can meet domestic demand and potentially export surplus products to neighboring countries. To make this a reality, the Nigerian government has played a crucial role in attracting investors to the refining sector. The government over time has implemented policies and regulations that encourages investments in the oil and gas industry, including the refining sector. For example, the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board implemented policies that required oil companies to prioritize local content in their operations. This created opportunities for local businesses to participate in the refining sector, either as investors or as contractors. Furthermore, the government went ahead to provide incentives to investors such as tax breaks and investment allowances. The Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission had also been established to promote investment in the country and provide support to investors. In recent years, several investors have shown interest and have announced plans to build several refineries across Nigeria. A typical example is the recently completed Dangote Refinery, which is currently the largest refinery in Africa. It currently has the capacity to produce about 650,000 barrels of oil per day and is one of the largest refineries in Africa as earlier stated. This refinery, according to internal sources, was financed through a combination of debt and equity. Nigeria's growing population of over 200 million people is currently facing an ever-growing fuel crisis as earlier stated, despite its vast oil reserves. The shortage of refining capacity at existing oil refineries is the main driver of the Nigeria's fuel crisis, which hampers the socio-economic development of the country. This had placed a high subsidy burden on the government before now and has long made Nigeria dependent on imported petroleum products. Fuel crisis in Nigeria had also led to the proliferation of artisanal refineries in the oil-producing Niger Delta region, with huge environmental and health challenges. The recently signed Petroleum Industrial Act paved the way for increased investment in Nigeria's crude oil refining capacity. The act addresses the grievances of oil-producing communities, unemployment, lack of socio-economic development and environmental pollution, and the act also makes provision for a less cumbersome process for granting operational licenses to investors in the downstream oil operations, which had increased investment interest in modular refineries. Recently, there has been increased interest from the Nigerian Government Petroleum Ministry in modular refineries as a means of addressing the deficit of petroleum products. Modular refineries are simplified crude oil refineries with capacities ranging from 1,000 to 30,000 barrels per day. They are well suited for remote areas. Over 30 licenses for modular refineries were issued in 2015 by the Department of Petroleum Resources, but very few operated effectively because of inconsistencies surrounding policies and regulations in the Nigerian investment space. Aside from the newly constructed Dangote Refinery, which is the largest in Africa, modular refineries are considered useful to help meet energy demand in the country. To be candid, the influx of investors building refineries in Nigeria has been a welcome development for the country's economy. This trend has numerous advantages, which will have a positive impact on the country's energy sector and overall economic growth. It will also increase the country's refining capacity, create jobs and stimulate economic growth, thereby bringing in the much-needed foreign direct investment. It will also go a long way to reduce the vulnerability to fluctuations in global oil prices and enable Nigeria to maximize the value of its oil resources. To be candid, this is a much needed investment in the country at this particular critical point in time, and hopefully it works out for the government as it will go a long way to help Nigeria. Do well to drop your honest comment, don't forget to subscribe and share. Thank you.